I'm Paul Muldoon. You're listening to the Ireland Podcast.
And then
Who are you and where are you from?
So my name is Michael Fayne, and I am from New York City.
And why are you here today?
My wife and I came to Ireland to visit one of our children who's in graduate school up in Galway. So we were up in Galway and then we came down here.
And were you here whilst the news occurred? Or?
Yes, we were on a tour bus of all things. And another thing I'll never do again, but the fellow announced it on the bus.
Okay. What was the atmosphere like whenever the announcement happened?
Not much to say about it. He proceeded to then, he had a bit of like a musical tape thing going on, and somehow he plugged into Falling Slowly, and he played that. So the people on the bus, I don't think erupted in too much of a way, but the playing of the music, and it was, I just know for myself, it was shocking, because he's only 56 years old, and I don't know. I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s, when every couple of weeks it seemed like one of your rock heroes died of a drug overdose. It was just like relentless, Yeah. But it doesn't happen, at least to the people I follow, anymore so much.
Well, now they're dying of old age.
Yeah, but so this felt, it's just kind of shocking and sad. I didn't know his stuff that well. I'm going to look into it more, but there were 5 or 6 points of where I listened to him, including, the movies that he was in, and there was something very striking about him. He seemed like who knows, but he seemed like a really a genuinely good man, and there was something very, very heartfelt about the music that I listened to. So, it's a loss.
What was the atmosphere like in the room?
Well, it's interesting because you had 2 very different sets of type of people in the room. There was the long line of people such as ourselves, the ordinary folk who were slowly filing through. But then it's not really what I expected. I expected like the casket, and then just you walk past it. But the casket was here, and you kind of curve around it. But there's an outer circle of people who are just there, of all sorts. But they must be people who had some connection to him, because they weren't moving through; they were there. Who knows? Musicians, people in his personal life, but a lot of them, well over 100, certainly. It seems like they're waiting for something. Like they're like when we all finish with when the public finishes with its passing through, something else is going to happen, I think.
You were lucky. The queue got closed off there.
Yeah, we got there sort of just in time. Yeah. It's a moving thing.
Yeah.
It really is.
A force of nature he was.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Sure, you're very welcome.
Who are you and where are you from?
So my name is Vojta. I'm from Czech Republic, and I was kind of lucky to be able to call myself a friend of Glen Hansard.
How did you meet him, or what happened?
I met him well, obviously, I was listening to his music since like high school. So since like once make the big breakthrough, you know, with Markéta Irglová, and yeah, so I knew him for like a very long time, but just recently, like 2 years ago, he was doing like a really small gig in Olomouc in my city in Czech Republic. So I went there, and it was, because I'm also a photographer, it was kind of amazing. It was just for 300 people, and the lighting was amazing. It was like having him in a photo, you know, atelier or whatever. And so I could make a lot of photos, and I wait for him after the show, and I had like a personal message for him because I was struggling back then with like addiction and stuff, and his music really helped me to keep forward and stay sober and stay strong. So I was telling him about that, and he looked moved with it. So we stayed in touch. And sometimes he wrote me, we met many other times, and yeah, it felt surreal that I can really call him friend, and he was telling me my brother, so it was kind of unbelievable for me.
What can you tell us about his personality that most of us don't know?
I think when people say never meet your heroes, you know, so you will be disappointed. This is totally opposite, because Glen was like the heartwarming and actually very easygoing and not like prima donna. You know, he could be that. He was famous and everything, but he was just a normal guy and always like wanting to people have fun, and I could tell that he was really the happiest man when he was playing for kind of his friends, for just small venues, and it felt like we were on the street basically busking and stuff like that. So yeah, for me it was kind of the way he was not showing off that he's this famous, you know, singer-songwriter.
Must say, GK.
You're welcome.
Ahoy.
we should have a selfie.
Selfie, let's do a selfie.
That's nice. Okay. Jsme krásný.
Ty jsi krásný.
Ty jsi krásný.
Who are you and where are you from?
My name is Athos Chambers. I'm from Dublin.
What are you doing here today?
I came to pay my respects to a good friend of mine, Glen Hansard.
How did you know him?
I've known him for about 35 years. He's a friend of the family. We've known him since he was beginning out in the frames. I've known him throughout all the years, and I've often sung with him, and it's been a privilege.
Did you meet him? Are you from Ballymun then?
No, from Blackrock.
How did you meet him then, in the first time?
He is a good friend of my brother's here beside me, and he got to know him going to the first early gigs. So then he used to come around to our house and play songs for us in the early days of the frames, which was an honour.
What do you know about him that most people don't?
Well, I know him personally.
So what will people not know, like behind the music?
Behind the music, he was just such a beautiful soul, a normal man. Fame, money, none of it changed him in the slightest. He just had a good heart and a good soul. And he would help anybody and give them a leg up as much as he possibly could wherever he went. He wasn't looking for to keep the fame. He wanted to spread it.
What do you miss most about him?
Oh, well, I miss singing with him, especially. He was a good pal.
What's your favourite memory of him?
Well, I was with him on Tuesday night, so I suppose that's probably my favourite memory of him.
What did you do?
Singing a song with him on Tuesday night. We sang Slow Train Coming, and it was special. You know, really special.
My condolences to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Who are you and where are you from?
I'm from Dublin. My name's Loren.
And how do you know Glen? I assume that you know him.
I know Glen from the early 90s when we were all townies in Dublin around Grafton Street and St Anne Street. We used to go into the Coffee Inn and Bewley's, and then sometimes down to the Hare Krishna Temple on George's Street, back in our early days of exploring and trying to break out and find ourselves, yeah.
Break out from what to what?
Well, Ireland at the time was coming out of a long history of being quite, well, shaped by our parents and former generations, and we wanted to put our own mark on it. And I guess everybody, each generation likes to make it their own.
What's your earliest memory of Glen?
Earliest memories were at a friend's house for 21st birthday and Glen playing Revelate.
Hey, buddy.
First time I think he played the song to anyone. And his friend Rav, you may talk to Rav after. Yeah, so it was just the intensity of his playing and emotion around the guitar. Group of guys at 21. We felt young then. It doesn't sound young now, but it did seem like we were younger then than it sounds, if that makes any sense.
What do you know about him that most people don't? I'm talking about most people being the entire planet.
That's okay. I don't know that I have any special access to it. Glen was a very, very deep feeling, intense guy, searching, seeking out, restless, just to be himself, the way he sung, the way he performed, the way he wrote songs was just very, very raw and visceral, and he was in a way unfiltered and very, very giving of himself. He shared himself very, very deeply. And I think that's, in a way, what a lot of people are responding to with his loss.
What do you miss most about him?
I don't know that I can speak to what I miss. It's a bit soon, and it wasn't somebody I'd see frequently. So in reality, that would be difficult to compute. But something interesting since his news of his death has come, it's reminded me of something in myself that I think Glen would have liked, which is just to waken back up the parts of myself. So I've picked up a guitar again after 15 years, and I started to play songs where I felt I expressed myself with a guitar like I never had before. And I'm going to chalk that up to being something of his influence.
You're going to keep playing the guitar, I hope.
Yeah, I've since sat down this week and selected out 30 songs I'm going to play that are, it's not like me collecting songs, but in a way songs I want to sing so that my daughters know me better. So which is speaking a lot more to his authenticity and who he was.
What was the first song that you played whenever you picked up the guitar after 15 years?
Oh, I played the L triangle. Bit of a cliche, but
perfect.
There you go. But I played it the way Glen interpreted it, with the guitar just as an accompaniment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Loren, my sincere condolences to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, good luck. Cheers. Yeah.
Hiya, my name is Barra Donovan. I'm from Swords, North County Dublin, Fingal, and it is a sad day here in Dublin.
So, you were singing there a moment ago quite a few songs by Glen. How come you know so much of his stuff?
Glen's a hero, man. One of my heroes. I think a hero to most people who are here today. I'm a songwriter too. Glen's had such a big influence on my music. So that's why I'm here in general. I had to come by and pay my respects, you know.
What is it about his music that's so special to you as a songwriter?
I think there's a certain quality to Glen as a person that it attracts the same quality to his music. He embodies what it means to be Irish in an extremely positive and beautiful way. And I suppose when I listen to his music, it makes me proud to be Irish, proud to be a musician, proud to be human in a way. He was a very human, that's a weird way to put it, but his music was very human.
In an everyman way, I'm assuming here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exact, that's a great way, everyman way.
Yeah. And you saw him live?
No, actually, I never saw Glen live, which is a big regret, but I did get to meet him.
Oh, you met him? How'd you meet him?
So it was actually 2 nights before he passed.
Right.
It was the night of the All-Ireland final, and like every musician who enjoys his pints, on a night out I found myself in Whelan's. And we're enjoying a few pints, we enjoyed the game, we were cheering for Mayo, and who walks in but Glen? And so of course I see this, I had to say hello. So I go up, I start chatting with him, and very, very approachable, very easy to talk to, and very invested in what everyone had to say to him. We talked for about 30 minutes, I'd say.
Wow.
Just about music, about life, and he was such a gentleman. Had so much time for a fellow musician, a fellow person. Everybody wanted a picture, you know, and he kept taking pictures of people, and then circling back to me and asking, following up, saying, "You were telling me about this and that." Lovely man.
What did he tell you that night that you will keep forever?
Glad you asked. I asked him, as a songwriter myself, how can I break out into this world? How can I do what you do? And he said, I'll put it to you very plainly, he said, just keep at it and don't stop. That's the exact words he said to me. I'll never forget it to the day I die.
Tell me where people can find you.
You can look me up, Google me, Barra Donovan, BarraDonovan. And then I'm on Spotify, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Apple Music, all them yokes. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok. That's about it. But yeah, just pop in my name, I should pop up. So
Brilliant. What have we lost?
I once heard Glen say something in tribute to Lee Von Helm, I'm going to quote him now. People say when someone like of this magnitude moves on, wow, we've lost a great one, but we don't lose, we gain. What we inherit from these people is the best of them, and in Glen's case, we've inherited quite a lot.
Did you see him?
I went in to see him, yeah, and pay my respects.
Just show everybody where he is.
So, behind them 4 windows there's a big chapel, and he's currently lying in state in there.
Yeah. Barra, thank you for your time. And the music, I really appreciated the music, yeah?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Lloyd Chambers, and I'm here. I'm from this beautiful city. I'm originally from Blackrock. I live way down in Wicklow, so I just came here today. Just made it at the very last moment as we entered in over here to say our fond farewell to our friend Glen.
And how do you know Glen?
Well, my brother Ravinol, who's over here, there he is, met Glen in 1986, so I was 5 years old, so Glen's been kind of in and around the family since then. And they're into music together. Glen would have played on busking on Grafton Street. My brother was sort of in that scene, and so he played my brother's 21st birthday at our house. way back, I don't know, whatever year that would have been, 1990 I guess, or in and around then. And so I was a child seeing all this. We've known Glen for a long time. So for my parents, he's almost like an adopted son, you know.
What's your earliest memory of him?
He played a song in our kitchen that, actually in our dining room, that I haven't, he said, from what I can recall, I was a child, right, that he said that the band had not heard it yet. Now, I had it in my head that the song was Revelate, but I'm not sure. But I remember when I heard Revelate, we got backstage VIP tickets to an event in Vicar Street many years ago. And I was in the crowd and I heard the song. I was turned around to a guy beside me and said, Glen sang this in our kitchen before the band heard it. And of course he didn't believe me. And then I went backstage and we were talking to Glen about it. So it's one of the kind of standout moments for me, I guess. I don't know whether I have the details all right, because you know when you're small you can mix up stuff. But yeah, I remember we definitely heard a song from him that nobody had ever heard before. And we felt very grateful to kind of be... there's a lot of power in the creative process. Like I write music and write poetry since I was 11 years old. And I don't know where it comes from, but it comes almost like it comes through you, right? And so, yeah, Glen definitely had access. He was connected in, you know.
Where can people find out about your music and poetry? Is it online?
No. Nowhere.
You don't share it?
That's how we can find it. Nowhere. That's where you can find it. No, I do. I've started playing the guitar again every day. I'm doing lessons and all, because you hit a plateau and you can't go past that. But I wrote 16 songs, so there may be an album there at some point. I played like open mic stuff over the years, but never really went that direction for one reason or another. Right now I have a mobile pizzeria business, so I have 3 of them on the road, so I'm very busy making pizzas and doing private parties and weddings and things like that. So
what's the name of that? And I'm asking this, okay. So,
yeah. It's called Buska Koppel Pizzeria, so horse boxes basically, yeah, because I have a few of them. Yeah. So it's all Squailgate.
Did Glen ever eat one of your pizzas?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I suspect he would have liked them, to be fair. But no, I don't think so. No, it's the business is about 3 years in. Okay. So we just started year 4. Yeah. That's what I spend my time doing.
What do you know about Glen that most people being the entire planet, won't know about him?
Well, I've been listening to a lot of the commentary over the last week. I've read a lot of the Facebook posts that people have written about him. And I think everybody had a very similar impression of him, in the sense that no matter how famous he became, he stayed exactly the same. There was no airs or graces about him. He would always stop what he was doing, no matter how important the person he was talking to, if he recognised you, and stop and say, "Hey man, how's it going? It's good to see you." And you know, always that was very evident, you know. And you know, everybody's heard the stories or knows somebody who became famous and then suddenly they don't remember where they came from. That wasn't the case with Glen, and that's something I think a lot of people are aware of. And whenever you talk to people and here today, it's the same feedback I hear from everybody. So, is it something nobody else knows? Not really, but it's certainly something stood out for me. And we're very grateful and very proud of Glen, you know. My brother, who's over here, the other brother, Athos, he was with him on the night in question, and they were singing together. So yeah, it's very immediate because it was a couple of hours beforehand, you know. I might not have seen Glen for a year or two because I've been busy working, and it affected the whole family like in a very close way, you know. So it's sad, but at the same time, you'd kind of want to think that when you pass away from this world, that people will have had a positive experience knowing you and being influenced by whatever you put out there, whether it's your energy or your music or your poetry or whatever, or just your friendship, right? And that people can celebrate that. And right now, everyone has come together over the last week and here, and we're celebrating Glen and everything he brought to the world. And I think that's important, and I think he would have loved that. I think he might even have been, him being so humble, he would have been very surprised by the impact, I guess, and the sincerity people turn up with, you know.
What do you miss most about him?
His smile, probably. Yeah, he was always just very open. Straight away, the moment he saw this big smile, he'd wear it the whole time, you know. So, yeah, I'll miss the chance to randomly bump into him with different things and see him on the TV doing the thing at Christmas, busking on the street. Usually I'm working, so I don't get a chance to be there personally, but I'm going to miss those moments in his life that kind of pop up on social media for me, you know.
Lloyd, my sincere condolences to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Who are you and where are you from?
I'm Ravinol.
You weren't expecting that question.
I wasn't. Glen would have known me as Ravi.
Yeah.
And I'm originally from here in Dublin, although I don't live here anymore, but I'm from here.
Right. So, I know that you know Glen, so explain the relationship there.
I met Glen in the Clifton Country Blues Festival in 1990. That was the Frame's first official gig.
Oh.
And there was a band in our school called Dynamo Hum, and they were a bit of up and coming, and we were there, a whole bunch of us for that. And then we met Glen and his band, and he was, obviously he looked different. He had a massive locks of red curly hair, but he had the same intensity and the same, I was very drawn to him straight away. And over a period of time then we would go to a lot of the gigs, and he often we both noticed each other, I suppose. I was very drawn to him, and at that time he noticed me in the audience. I used to be like directing the energy in the room and all of this, and he was like, you know, I remember the first time he said, "This song's for Ravinol," and so we kind of connected, and then we became friends, and we became very, very deep, close friends. Although Glen was like, he described it to me recently, he's like a sailor. He's always on the road and moving. So even though, and there's many people who were close with him, but like, it doesn't mean you would see him all the time. You'd see him along the road, as he might say, you know, so because he was always on the move. And so you had to fit into his life, kind of like, you know, so I would always make the effort to go and see him wherever he was, if he was nearby. But we shared some very deep stuff between us. And he, as you can see from the whole thing, he was extraordinary. Better background, huh?
Yeah. I'm just thinking the wind's blowing. Carry on. Don't let me disturb.
He's an extraordinary person and very, very deep. And I suppose another thing we connected on was around 1993, 94, I started to go into the Hare Krishna temple on Sundays. And so did another friend of ours, Mick Duff, who was in a band called Dragonfly. And Glen used to come with us. And we'd go in together and we'd have the vegetarian food and hear the music and really love it. And there was an older monk there called Tribhuvannath who was amazing. And I ended up going and traveling with him for 7 years and becoming a full-time Hare Krishna monk. But Glen had a relationship with him as well. And Glen stayed with his music, which I think was the perfect thing for him to do. But he took something from that. Like anyone who knows Glen's music knows it's very, very deep. I mean, you might like the tunes and good and all of that, and the melodies and the atmosphere, but actually some of the lyrics are incredibly deep and profound. And I think, you know, he took a little bit of that sort of spirituality, and as he was kind of feeling that and connecting in a deep way to himself, and you know, different people in different traditions might see it differently, but he was sharing a little bit of that with everyone. So like if you think about the gigs, they were very communal experiences. He would invite the audience in. It was like there was the audience, there was Glen, and there was also this kind of connection maybe to something deeper. And all of those things were kind of experienced together. And that's a little bit similar to what it was like when we were in these big kirtans and we were all chanting and, you know, and everything else. And Glen loved that. I remember in 1996 he came to London to meet me, and there was a big gathering of the original Hare Krishnas that came to London and met George Harrison and the Beatles.
Oh, wow.
And it was a bit of a big deal, all kind, you know, those people. And my mentor, that senior monk I talked about, was leading the kirtan in this setting, Camden Town Hall, about over 1,000 people. And Glen was with me, and Tribhuvannath invited Glen in and asked Glen to lead the kirtan. And Glen was leading the kirtan. He was just young. And he was blown away by that experience.
Oh, was he singing at that point?
No, he was. But he was a singer.
singing?
Oh, he was already. He was a musician. Like, fully. Like he was in it. He was in his.
Oh, this is 90s. So sorry.
Yeah. But what I mean is that in that setting, he would have just felt like, you know, he's he's a technically like a nobody in that setting.
Yeah.
But Trubhunath brought him forward and brought him in and gave him that sort of opportunity, and he felt very blessed by that. And he then did that for others, didn't he? He would always bring people in and give them the stage and share the stage and not be, hierarchical about it or whatever. He created a very flat sort of welcoming thing for other musicians coming through. And actually that monk, Trubhunath, they're very different settings, right? Obviously Glen's a musician, he was a monk, but they were so similar. They both sang like someone described recently with Glen, sang like his life depended on it.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
Right? And that was what Trubhunath was like as well. Completely playing the drum, his neck bulging, like totally fully in it. Yeah. And they were both like that. Very different, but I think Glen was almost, there's so many layers to a person. He's a musician. He's obviously a father, a brother, friend, all of those things. But he was also, not to be overly dramatic about it, but he was a bit of a mystic. Like, in a sense, he was a searcher. He was also not satisfied. Like, he wasn't just singing songs and just kind of being a musician. It was part of the search and the mystery, and he was very drawn to that. And he was drawn to anybody who kind of had a bit of that. And so that's something we shared. Do you know what I mean? It was very, and that's mainly whenever we met, we were in on that level. And I think that's something that he shared with people. And I think it's part of why people feel so profoundly moved by him. It's not just because he had good songs. There's something like his spirit was very deep. And I think he shared that with people and maybe made them feel that a little bit in themselves, You
interviewed him in his house for an hour and a half?
So yeah, a while ago, it would have been a good few years now, I had a podcast. I have another new one now, but
what's it called?
So if people want to check it out, it's called Evolving Door.
Right.
The theory behind that is that sometimes we might be stuck in a revolving door, going round and round.
Ah, cool.
But in your life, there might be moments, if you're lucky, where you get a little upgrade and you're thinking like an evolving door. Yeah. So that's what the idea was. So I went to see him in his house and we sat down for whatever it was, an hour and a bit. And we went pretty deep. So if people want to hear that podcast, just go to Apple, Spotify, wherever, and look up Evolving Door and then search. It's called Allowing Magic into Your Life.
Great.
With Glen. Yeah. And because we're friends, he shared very deeply. What's
tricky about interviewing your friend?
Well, in that one, actually, funnily enough, it wasn't hard in that instance. I listened back to it yesterday, and I think it was very effortless just listening back to it, because I didn't have to really. I had a few little things that I knew I wanted to talk about, but other than that, we kind of flowed, Because ideally in any conversation, in a pub or anywhere, no one's thinking about what they're going to say, are they? They're just talking. So I think the best conversations or podcasts are where you get as close to that as you can. So it felt a bit like that.
And condense that hour and a half into a paragraph.
Allowing magic into your life.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I will condense it into one line from Glen's song. He's had a line in one of his songs called, I can't remember the name of the song, but the line is, the only way to hold on to this love is with an open hand. That's what the whole conversation was about. Okay. In so many different layers.
Yeah.
Life, money, love, art, work. So if that doesn't make complete sense, go and listen to the thing and it'll make sense.
That's great.
It's that thing of like, you can't force things. We want to. We all, because we want outcomes, don't we? We're trying in life for certain things and everything else. But ultimately, sometimes when you let go, it doesn't mean you're not still trying. You're fully placing yourself in the moment and allowing the magic to happen. But you kind of also have to. Another thing is grace. Glen was a big. If you listen to it in his songs, there's many places where he mentions grace. So what is grace? Grace is that bit where you make the effort, but the other bit is grace. Right? It's there's a saying also in the Bhagavad Gita where it says something like, Krishna says, I'll preserve what you have and I'll carry what you lack. So it's, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of acknowledging that it's not just a conveyor belt. You have to put your heart into it, but still, ultimately, you need a little bit of magic, a little bit of grace but you have to be open to it.
I'm asking others this question, and I feel like you've already answered it thus far, but I wanted to dig deeper anyway. What do you know about him that most of the planet doesn't?
Well, I would have nothing that I wouldn't know what anyone else knows or doesn't know.
Well, what I mean by, like, what side of him did you see that others did not?
I think it's hard to answer because when you say others, there'll be a million different sides that lots of different people would have seen, and some people would have seen this one and that one and the other one. So I couldn't really comment on what anyone else has seen, but I know what you mean.
I'm talking about the musician on the stage. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
And the actor on screen.
Yeah. I think it's a good. So the way what I'll tune into is for every person that in one way is very special, there's also they're human, and so they come with all the frailties that everyone does. And that's why I like listening to podcasts or reading about people's life stories, because there's always the side that is truly amazing and wonderful, and often on a stage or a screen that's magnified. But of course, also, they have all the things that everyone else has, doubts and insecurities and all the rest of it. And so I think, that's a hard thing for people to get their head around in a way. We always think in binaries. Well, either they're this and they're too up on a pedestal, or they're this and they're just totally normal. But each of us in our different ways. What do they say? Something like, I think, is it maturity is being able to hold two apparently contradictory things at the same time and not get confused. So it's to embrace the whole of someone and to sort of love them and appreciate them for all their magic and but also not to put them too high on a pedestal, but not to knock them off the pedestal either, just to accept that they have all sides to them, And everyone, like, I'm not just talking about Glen, that's a truth for us all to learn to accept also about our own selves.
What's your fondest memory of him?
He gave great hugs. Such good hugs. And with him, it's something that I was kind of aware of, but when someone passes you, it all becomes really into focus. He was extremely present, And so he was present when he met people. That's why they felt moved by it, because he wasn't just meeting them or shaking their hand or taking a photo or saying hello. He would try to really be there with you. Do you know what I mean? And I think, but like even people like, you hear about presidents and stuff that people found very amazing, is like they would remember everyone's names. And I'm not saying that this is not his bit, but that thing of being really personal with people. If you look at all the people that are outpouring now about how, he would take the time, he would stop and he would talk, and he would often be exhausted on the other end of it and, spent. But while he was there, he was going to be there. And that's a gift, because what are you giving people? You're actually giving them your very self. Mm-hmm. Like if you think about, maybe, dare we say it, like the idea of whether you call it the presence, the soul, whatever. You're not just there on a superficial. Mm-hmm. He tried to really be there in his interactions, and I think those hugs. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like this is almost as close as I can get to interviewing him. So I'm going to ask this question because it's probably a question I would have asked him, but it's probably better to ask you. What was he like after the Oscar? What was his reaction? Like, did he believe it, or was he blasé, or what?
He was very excited, of course.
I mean, because whenever I think of that Oscar, I think of Purple Rain. Yeah, it's another song which is a classic.
Yeah.
It's epic, and it's won an Oscar.
Yes, I think Glen had, like a lot of things, initially the commitments, you know, maybe then he was, there was, so I'm going to describe the two sides of the thing I talked about earlier, that the apparent contradiction, right?
Yes.
I'm going to describe both.
Yes.
And they have to go together.
Right.
So, in one sense, he was partly uncomfortable, you know, with a big success. But I think he learned to, just like any of us, even at our own smaller levels, you know, we might feel uncomfortable with too much praise or different things, you know. But at the same time, as you mature and sort of love yourself a bit more, you know, you can kind of almost allow yourself to accept it or to enjoy it, you know. So on one hand, he was as gleeful and as excited and over the moon as anyone would be. It's amazing, it's incredible. But at the same time, I suppose he was just a bit like uncomfortable, I suppose, with anything that was maybe too commercial or too much of a big success thing. But I think he really came to peace with it as he really wizened and matured and grew into it. Like as he was older, he could understand that. Yeah, like you'd be really grateful for those big commercial successes. He was grateful. I mean, you know, it was great. I mean, it brought financial stability. It brought lots of things that you know were really great. But it wasn't why he did it. But he was able to kind of sit peacefully with it, I think. But I remember I phoned him on the night of the Oscars.
Oh, cool.
And he answered, and he was just so excited. And he was telling me about it, all the people they were hanging out with and they were meeting, and because it was a big deal, even for the so-called famous Hollywood people. They wanted to be around them because it was kind of like this magical story of, you know, this little film and these people who were catapulted. It was romantic. It was such a, and so a lot of the, you know, super famous people were kind of wanted to hang out with them, and we're hanging out with them, and it was fun. And actually, Glen told me on that call, he said, because he would, you know, at the temple and everything in the ancient Indian culture and philosophy, the number 108, it has a special significance. It's considered like a very auspicious number. And he said the seat I was sitting in the Oscar hall was 108. Can you believe it?
So he knows his Krishna stuff.
Oh no, he like I say, he was actually very. It was really in there. It was real for him. He just didn't do. That's what I'm saying. He took it into his life on the voyages that he took, you know, into the world, and somehow he shared it in his own very unique way and in a very indirect way. And I don't mean he shared it from the point of view of like that people needed to identify it as that or link it back to that. He shared that magic and beauty of connection with something more wonderful and divine through his music. And I think that is something that he experienced with us at the Krishnas, yeah.
What was he looking forward to?
Of course, he was looking forward to spending, you know, in continuing to spend time with his beautiful son Christy and his wife Maura. And I would say more than anything, that was where he was really taking sustenance and nourishment from, you know. Of course, he was working and he was doing all the things he was doing, but he really, really valued being able to be there and be with his family and his son, you know.
What will you miss most about him?
Oh, I'm still processing the whole thing, if I'm honest. I couldn't give you. It would seem like a trite answer, whatever I could say. Do you know what I mean? I can't. I'll just miss him. You know.
What have you not said that you would like to say?
There's nothing more I need to say. I think in some ways I'm not like it sounds silly. It's not like I've got nothing to say, but I'm kind of responding to you. You've asked me to say a few words, and I'm kind of saying it, but I don't need to say anything, if you know what I mean, in one sense. I'm going to miss Glen a lot, but as sad as it is, it's also been so joyous to see the tsunami of love and support for him. And the way I've kind of felt like I understand it is that he gave so much of himself. It's kind of getting all that love and spirit, I suppose, that he gave out. It's been reflected back at him, and it's beautiful to see people genuinely feeling that warmth, and kind of it's like it's a beautiful thing. I think it's sad, isn't it? I mean, I know he felt loved, but I think he would have been overwhelmed by the amount of love, and just as a person, as a friend, it's beautiful to see.
I've been reminded, by the way, I just realised I asked you twice what did you miss most about him, and you said hugs the first time. Forgive me.
No, you said what was the most, the thing that I liked the most, or something. Anyway, it's all right. Don't worry.
So it shows you how in the moment I am being, and not trying to remember everything. I've been reminded this past number of days. About the hard work that he did for Shane MacGowan's funeral. He was a musical director there.
Yes.
I was there for Shane MacGowan's funeral as well. I was on the outside, but I did something similar to this, you know. Can you share some memories of that moment? Do you have any window to that?
Yeah, I wasn't there. I wasn't at Shane MacGowan's funeral, but I did see it online. You see, the thing about Glen, whether it was Shane MacGowan's funeral, whether it was the busk, the big busk, whether it was, he told me a story about Sean Penn was making a film. I think it's called My Brother's Keeper or something like that, or My Daughter's something or other. But anyway, it's a film. People can look it up. And I think Sean Penn had asked Eddie Vedder to do the music, and Eddie couldn't do it. So then they asked Glen, and Glen was doing it. And I'm not going to get all the details correct, but the essence of the story is that it wasn't really clear, like, whether there was a budget or whether he was going to get, like, you know, but Glen was asked to do it, and so he did it. He went ahead and he booked the studios, he booked the musicians, and he did it. And I don't think he ever got paid or ever asked to get paid. So and it's the same with, you know, a lot of things that he did. If he followed his heart and his interest, and he wasn't too bothered, like, that was enough. And that's
holding love with an open hand. Exactly
that. It's like not calculating or measuring, well, if I do this, how many. If he wanted to do it and he was drawn, he was there. And in the same way, like, I read something in one of the memories, and someone said something like, how do you know, you know, to keep going or to stay positive or whatever. And I think the answer he gave was something like, the only thing you can do is keep turning up and try to follow what feels truest or most true in every moment. And that's the path, if you like, that he took. It's like he was a true artist, I suppose. You know, money came. It's in the podcast interview. He said, you know, sometimes I've had a lot of money, sometimes I've not had a lot of money, but it's not really that was never the yardstick that decided anything, if you like.
I've run out of questions, but you know, I feel so grateful to you for sharing your time with me, and anybody else who's watching this. It's great to document this time, and yeah, thanks again, and my sincere condolences to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Who are you and where are you from?
Conor Masterson. I'm from Dublin originally, but I've been living in the UK for 30 years, and I came back yesterday.
You came back for the funeral?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I came back.
How do you know Glen?
I heard his. Oh yeah. I heard his music. I was living in the Midlands of England in '96. I'd moved over in '95, and I was in Andy's Records, which is basically like HMV or Virgin Megastore or whatever your like high street megastore is. And in this bargain bin was Revelate, a single by the Frames. And I saw this thing. I'm in England, and I went, "Oh, that's a band that used to play in Whelan's all the time." Because in Dublin, where I lived in Dublin, you'd get the bus into town, and it would just go down that road past Whelan. So it was just part of the wallpaper, and I would see posters. So I knew nothing about the Frames, and so I saw this single, and I went, "All right, 50p, that sounds reasonable, you know." And went home, played it, went, "Fuck, this is really good." Long story short, I was home at Christmas, as you do, visiting the family in Dublin. The Frames were playing at Whelan's, went to see them. They opened with an instrumental. Half a dozen songs in, they did Debaser. Glen dived in the crowd. I caught the guitar. I went, "Oh, all right, this is happening." And then I was... I think I saw them again, another gig, and then the next day they were playing in a small place in the UK, and I thought, right, I'm bringing my camera. So over that period of about a year or so, they were playing gigs, and I got to know the guys in the band, and I met Glen, and I took photos and showed them photos, and it just went from there.
And where are these photographs available?
I have a website, conormasterson.com, and there's some on there, but the band have used them. They're Glen. I did photograph on his Rhythm and Repose album. Those are my portraits of him, and he's various Glen's photographs you might have seen, hot press, various places, But
You made a movie with him?
I made a film. We were. The Swell season had just finished their tour, 3 years of being on the road, of having won an Oscar, and we were in the Royal Festival Hall at the bar. Marquetta was around, it was just a few people around, and I said to Glen, I can't remember what the instigator was, maybe there was a gig coming, I said, I'd love to film you guys in Whelan's and just capture the Frames, the essence of the frame. Long story short, again, we're basically like, Glen was like, "Let's make an art film." Like, "Yeah, you ain't like right." So we were like committed, "Yeah, I'm going to make a film." And so I filmed them on their Irish tour then on so the instigation, I guess, was the 20th anniversary tour. That was what was going on. And it just seemed like an obvious thing to do. So I said, "Okay, I'm going to film you. I'm going to capture some stuff and see how it's feeling. And if it feels like it's interesting, we'll keep going with it."
Sugar. My camera's gone weird. Hold on. Where'd you go?
Oh, hey.
So, okay, but we're not going down there.
Oh yeah, cool.
Sorry, carry on.
The obvious, the 20th anniversary tour of the Frames was coming up a few months after the Swell season had finished 3 years. So it seemed like a brilliant time to revisit the Frames, and in the context of what had been going on, the 20th anniversary of the Frames was a very exciting moment. So it went from there. I came and filmed them for several dates, and we went from there.
Where can we see that film?
It has been on Apple Prime and on YouTube, but we're looking at relaunching it because it's been due a relaunch for various reasons. The production company who hosted it, they are no longer around, so it needs a bit of a refresh. And it's something I've been talking to Claire about already, and now at this moment it's like it's a bit early to talk about it, but it'll be. You'll see it. Yeah, it'll be back. Yeah. It's not gone anywhere. Yeah.
I think we should wrap it up here because we're all going home here.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But thanks for your time.
No worries.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, cool.
My condolences.
Yeah, thanks. Did you ever meet Glen?
I did.
Yeah. How did you know?
I've been waiting for this.
Okay.
I could tell my story.
Yeah. What's your name again?
Fender.
Fender. It is. Okay.
Well, you can ask me who are you, and you can ask me who are you and where you're from.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a car coming behind, so one sec.
That's good.
Let's walk this way a little bit.
Okay.
We'll walk and talk.
Yeah.
So Fender, um, are you gonna record this asking yourself who are you and where are you from?
No, you're going to ask me
You should
it.
do your own voice.
Oh,
of it.
okay. Who are you and where are you from?
Who are you? Where are you from, Fender?
I am from Fenderland and I am Galway man. Yeah. I'm Fender Jackson. I'm from Galway. I'm not from Galway. I'm from Derry, Tyrone border.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But lost my accent in Yorkshire. Lost the accent in Belfast, then Yorkshire, then London, then China. Now losing it in Galway.
I was going to get into your accent, but we'll leave that for another time.
Another time.
Yeah, it's a fascinating sound. Yeah. And
interview me.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember what you asked me. And okay, somebody's about to walk. It doesn't matter.
That doesn't matter. I don't mind.
So how did you first meet Glen?
I didn't first meet him. I saw him as a punter in the Mandela Hall in Belfast, Queen's University, Belfast, 1991, 2-ish. Just on that Picture of Love, that album. Yeah,
Their first album, yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
that surreal album cover. It's very, very Pixies vibey. You know, Dali-esque. No, not Dali. I'm thinking of Magritte. Yeah. So brilliant. He was like a powerful tour de force. I remember as a young man watching the violin player who's really hot, and then watching and getting distracted by him. And I'd be watching him for a while, and then I'm getting distracted by her. So it's like just constantly. But then the rest of the band were just incredible. You know, just phenomenal like performance. Fast forward. I saw the commitments, obviously, you know, but fast forward to 2 years ago, and I interviewed Paul Muldoon in Galway, and what happened was there was a Muldoon's picnic that night, and there's all these different bands playing that night, and Glen was playing, and he was incredible. He's playing solo acoustic. He was really. I'm laughing because he was playing loud, and then he's playing quiet, and then he kind of lost it with the sound guy. But he says, you know, here, listen. Whenever I go quiet, I'm not looking you to turn me up. I'm going quiet because I want to go quiet. Just leave me alone. Which as a musician, I thought I get it. You know, I understand that. But it did come off as a bit awkward. But once he had done that, he knew he had the power, the tools at his disposal, and he just laid it out, you know, and absolutely incredible. The interesting thing for me personally, was that I met him at interval. I can't remember if he played before or after the interval, but anyway, I met him at the interval. And I went up to him and I said, you know, Glen, I hope you don't mind. I run this podcast called the Ireland Podcast, as I always do, the Ireland Podcast. And he said, oh man, I love your podcast. I was like, really? Cool. This is a year in. So he had come across me. I'd interviewed Liam Mainley and Sharon Shannon, so I was sort of on the ascent. And he said, yeah, I really love your podcast. I said, perhaps you'd like to come on? I said, yeah, sure. How do we do it? He gave me his email address. And I was thinking, brilliant. I was like cloud nine. I got Glen Hansard's email address. Fantastic. I emailed him about 4 times since over the years, 2 years ago. And I didn't, you know, you don't want to inundate people. And I always thought, I'm not bothered that he's not responding because I'll get him down the line. And here I am down the line. And I got a network of his friends today in his wake, which is sad, obviously, but it's also maybe a more powerful interview, you know? Yeah, I think it is, because how many interviews has he done in his lifetime? Loads. And how many's been done of something like this? This is today, and you know. So I'm mindful of, as ever, whenever I'm doing wakes, I've done wakes before, that you're paying tribute to the person, you know, and you don't want to encroach on people's grieving, but you do want to celebrate the life. You know, I see a death as a time to start the celebrations. Not immediately, but you know, down for the long haul. Yeah. But what a great voice. And you know, the weird thing was, so this is another weird thing, is that I just done this deep analysis of a song, Alternative Ulster, and I uploaded it onto YouTube.
Stiff Little Fingers.
Stiff Little Fingers. I interviewed Henry Clooney for an hour and 3/4 or something, and it's going through YouTube clearance at the minute. And then I thought, okay, I want to break down some songs and really analyse them and really go into them in a big way. And the first song that I had on my list, well, is two. One is Dreams by Cranberries, and the other one is Falling Slowly. I can tell you, C, right? C was a D note. Don't. That's your C added 9. And then your, got your major 11th, sharpened 11th maybe? But anyway, and then you got your F. I've got to go into detail. I'll stop it there, but I will go into detail on that. And it's weird that this is time it's happening, because that was going to be one of my first two songs.
But that melody was no accident.
Tell me more.
So, no, I'm just joking. I'm riffing with you.
Oh,
it's
okay.
There's a sophistication there.
Oh, absolutely,
that is not to be
absolutely.
underestimated. That he really knew how to play.
And the harmony of the chorus, right?
Yeah.
He takes the high line, she takes the low line.
Yeah, that broke the song open.
Yeah, so he's singing lower in the verse, and she's singing lower in the chorus.
Yeah.
So there's a real Lennon McCartney thing going on there, you know?
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think he undersold himself as a musician. I think he was an incredible musician.
Absolutely.
And his songs got in the way of what he could actually do as a musician. And as a whole.
Yeah.
But he was so concentrated in songs, and he did all right. But what I mean is, as a musician, he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons why he was so great.
Yeah.
He had it. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm so sorry for his family. You know, I'm heartbroken for his family. As is everybody. I uploaded a video on the internet and it kind of went viral. And to see the comments and to see people's outpouring of grief and appreciation for the guy and the heartbreak, you know. Yeah, really sad.
It's probably the most positive thing I've ever seen on social media.
Yeah.
The connections that he made. So many. You can't. I've never seen anything like that personally.
Well, I guess I better wrap it. Here comes the rain now. Thank you for listening. If you know someone who might value this episode, please feel free to pass it on. And if you would like to support the continuation of the work, there is a link in the notes. Take care.